Good evening and welcome live to our broadcast studios in Columbia. I'm Mark Quinn, and we're here for a live debate between four candidates who are vying to become the Republican nominee in the race to become South Carolina's next governor. Our debate will last an hour. It's also being streamed live to our website at scetv.org. Before we go over the rules, let's go ahead and meet the candidates. First, from Westminster, a United States Congressman serving his fourth term representing the 3rd Congressional District, Mr. Gresham Barrett. Mr. Barrett, glad to have you here, sir. From Columbia, in his second term, serving as Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Andre Bauer. Mr. Bauer, glad to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
From Lexington, in her third term, representing the 87th House District, Representative Nikki Haley. Mrs. Haley, glad to have you here.
Hi, Mark.
And in his second term as the state's Attorney General, Mr. Henry McMaster from Columbia. Mr. McMaster, glad to have you here, sir.
Thank you, sir.
The rules of our debate are fairly simple. I will direct a question at a candidate. That candidate will have a minute to answer. Then the other three candidates will have a chance to follow up with a minute of their own. At the end of our debate, I'll open up the floor, and each of the candidates will have a minute to directly address the audience at home, and we'll do that in alphabetical order. Earlier tonight, we drew names to see which candidate would get the first question, and that will go to Representative Nikki Haley. Representative Haley, today marks the official end to one of South Carolina's more strange, painful political stories in recent memory. Attorney General McMaster finding no criminal fault with Governor Sanford. But I wanted to use that as a broader jumping off point for a much larger discussion that I had with a former cabinet member in Governor Campbell's administration, who said that he thinks eventually we'll look back at these 8 years, these past 8 years, as a lost opportunity, that the Republicans had all the levers of power, the governor's mansion, the House, and the Senate, coming in, preaching fiscal responsibility, the government would be run more like a business, and yet here we are facing a $500 million budget shortfall. Next year, perhaps $1 billion. How do you make the case to the voters out there that the Republicans deserve another 4 years with the keys to that governor's mansion?
You know, I think, Mark, that we have to understand that for the past 8 years, we've seen a lot of Republicans that have learned the talking points but haven't learned the conservative actions associated with those talking points. You know, under the federal government, we've watched people support Wall Street bailouts, auto bailouts, stimulus packages. You know, our state leaders have turned around and fought transparency and blown up the budget $1 billion a year. This is not about how Republicans act. It's about how conservatives act. And then I can also tell you, I've had the benefits of seeing the challenges of Governor Sanford. I know for a fact that in order to be effective with the legislature, you have to be predictable. Governor Sanford would react to everything that the legislature did. In order to be effective, you have to be predictable and let them know what you're going to do before they do it. What I will try and do is have an agenda every year. I will make sure there are major items on that agenda. I will go to the legislature and I'll say pick three, any three. Whatever 3 items they pick, I will make sure the entire public knows about it. And then I will work with them from the committee process to the House process to the Senate process, so by the time it gets to my desk, it will have been a team effort. For all those legislators that handled good government pro-business reforms, I will go into every one of their districts and praise them for it. For all the legislators that were against good government pro-business reforms, I'll go into every one of their districts and hold their hand to the fire. This is about the time that the people take legislature back.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. McMaster, your view on the past 8 years in Governor Sanford's performance as it relates to the Republicans in general?
Well, I would say the problem, the missed opportunities have been abundant in the last 8 years, but they also have been missed in the 4 years prior to that. I think starting with Governor Hodges' administration, we lost our zest for economic development, and we have not recaptured it yet. And the main reason I see is because we have not had the leadership at the top that understood that in this new world, we have to get into a knowledge-based economy in order to be able to compete not only nationally but globally. So what I would do is set out to make South Carolina the most business-friendly state in the country. Now, I'm the one of the candidates who has been in the executive arena for 4 years as Ronald Reagan's first U.S. attorney, finding problems, finding the solutions, and executing. And now 8 years as Attorney General. I told the people what I was going to do, and I have a record of getting that done. I would like to utilize our assets from the top to the bottom, the Port, Department of Commerce, and others on my strategic plan, which was published in August, to bring us into prosperity.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Representative Barrett, your response to what's happened in South Carolina for the Republican Party over the past 8 years?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Well, I think we have lost some opportunities. You know, I'm 49 years old, and I've been in politics for a little while, but growing up, I had one idol, And when I think about a political mentor, somebody that I looked up to, it was a guy named Carroll Campbell. And I believe with all my heart that Carroll Campbell did more for the state as chief executive officer. And, you know, he did it with a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate because he realized at the end of the day, it's personal relationships. This is a legislative state. Now, would I love restructuring? Would I love to see the hand of the governor strengthened? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's working with people. It's reaching across. It's accomplishing things. You can have the best ideas and the most innovative solutions, but if you can't work with people to accomplish that, it's all for naught. You have to have a plan, and we've got a plan, putting South Carolina back to work. It's a plan that we've worked with business leaders, with community leaders, with professors, with legislators across this state. So people have an ownership in it, and I think that's the way you have to govern. You have to bring people together to a common goal to take South Carolina somewhere where she's never been before.
Thank you, sir. And finally, to Lieutenant Governor Bowers, sir.
Well, I don't think the entire 8 years under the governor's watch have been a waste. I think he actually had some very valid points. He worked on the General Assembly, reduced spending. He had a great change at the DMV. I was on the MAP Commission where we looked at ways to make government run more efficiently. He reduced some taxes. So, I mean, there are some things he could have done differently, but I don't think it goes totally that he didn't get things done. And, of course, the leadership in the General Assembly. They live within their means. As much as I don't like some of the things they did, at least we are in a state like California where we owe billions and billions of dollars. As your lieutenant governor, I ran for a job that basically had very few duties. I convinced the General Assembly to put aging in there, which was my love and passion because my grandparents had had such a big part in my life. And we took an agency that was virtually unknown, and we raised the stature of seniors. We raised their awareness and having someone be their real trooper to try to get things done. The legislature passed everything I asked for, including increasing the number of geriatric physicians. We reduced the budget in the Lieutenant Governor's office, reduced spending in the Lieutenant Governor's office on aging. And so I feel like we had a lot of victories in these last 8 years when you talk about what we've done for seniors and how we've become one of the best states in America that looks after its elderly.
Great. Thank you very much, sir. The next question will be directed at Attorney General McMaster. The Americans for Tax Reform has become a pretty influential group nationwide, also at the state level with their grassroots movement. They ask their politicians that they support to sign a no-tax pledge. I'm curious among the group here if anybody on this panel has signed that no-tax pledge. And if so, I'd like to hear that if you do sign it, would that also include not raising the tax on our lowest in the nation cigarette tax, which is now at 7 cents? And may still be at 7 cents this time next year when one of you may be sitting in the governor's mansion.
Yes, I have signed the pledge, and I believe that the impulse that we often have to simply raise taxes as an answer to all the problems is not the right answer. I know under Ronald Reagan, when he cut taxes on incomes, that the tax rates went down, but the amount of revenue increased coming into the government because more people were saving. The burden was off of them. The burden ultimately was off of business and industry. And so that's the way to go. What I'm in favor of is broad, is comprehensive tax reform. We need to consider it across the board, all the taxes. And we live in a state where our taxes are out of whack. When we have the lowest cigarette tax in the country and the highest tax on manufacturers in the country at 10.5%, something is out of whack. I think if we take a comprehensive approach and we look especially at those taxes on business and industry and make those taxes flatter, fairer, lower, and more understandable, I think we'll be headed in the right direction. So on the cigarette tax or any other tax increase, it ought to be a part of a comprehensive plan or at least a package.
So standing alone, you would veto the cigarette tax?
That tax or any other standing alone, a tax increase, I believe is a bad idea. We have to fight that impulse and instead use whatever tax work we do to bring the taxes down on business and industry in a comprehensive fashion in order to spur industry and business in South Carolina.
Great. Thank you, sir. Congressman Barrett, you're familiar with the group Americans for Tax Reform?
Absolutely. And I did sign the No New Tax Pledge, Mark. And I agree with the Attorney General. Look, you know, if it's a cigarette tax, if it's property tax, let's look at commercial and property tax. We have the 7th highest commercial property tax rate and the highest industrial property tax rate. But if we go in and take any